Hi, it's me, Akma. Gonna record this video talking about different Legion spells. I'm gonna use this nice little tier list um, to represent some thoughts about their power level right now. So let's just get started right away. We have AOA, um, give you 100 Mythium, 20 income penalty. It's probably the strongest offensive spell for sending on 11. And it could be fine if you're sending 12 too. But it is a spell that that basically it's strong enough that it warps like how you play around it, like in even your mastermind selection. Like I'm way more willing to pick Cartel, Fiesta, cash out if I know it's AoA. Just because being strong in the first 10 games or 10 waves is a lot more important when you can die on the 11th one. Especially without tenacity, it's really easy to die on 11 to like big leaks. I don't know. In terms of offensive spells, it's probably the best, right? I mean, we have counterattack, PTA. I mean, AoA is just very reliable, and it's not even the worst defensive spell too, because it gives you 5 king ups for, um, which is pretty efficient. Um, let's just put it in A tier for now. Maybe I'll change my mind after ranking some other stuff. Allowance, just gives you 100 gold. I mean, it's kind of the benchmark that you might even judge other spells by. Like if you're better than allowance, you're probably a pretty good spell, and if you're worse than allowance, that's pretty not very good. I mean, you could say taxed is the true benchmark for a spell, but in my mind, it's allowance. It's just 100 gold. It's like a solid defensive option, not shattering in terms of like you always hold because someone has you have allowance, but it's never bad to pick it. One, because it's better than taxed, and 100 gold can be 2 workers. If you're pushing for something, it can be just 100 value for the hold. It's pretty solid. Battle scars. So battle scars, we get 360 health, 4% attack speed. So basically, after 5 procs, you're looking at something that's about Divine Blessings strength, close to it, and something that keeps scaling. So it's one of the better scaling spells. Like it's basically investment, but you're getting value onto specific units. So if you have synergies that are good with it, aka like damage reduction or something that abuses attack speed really well, like DK, or if you can get onto your priestess or your nightmare, this is really strong spell. So it's definitely, I think it's definitely an A tier spell. Um, one downsides of it that doesn't give you any effect on 11 as a defensive spell, uh, but or 12 or whatever. It's slow to generate value, just like investment. But I would say it's given that games generally are taking a bit longer and the wave endings are going later, Battle Scars is probably stronger. Counterattack, let's see. So you get 55 Mythium immediately, you get 55 Mythium every time you leak. So this is makes it one of the best defensive spells for going 12. Probably worse than Overwork, but less of a commitment than Overwork because you can also counterattack and not go 12. You can angle for other stuff, and it's not a one-time usage. Like you can use counterattack pretty efficiently. And basically, if you get one counterattack proc off, you've already passed AoA in terms of Mythium, and you don't have an income penalty, so it's oops, definitely not C tier. It's probably an A tier spell. Obviously, it's a little weaker in terms of 11 because it's only 55 Mythium, but everything after that, and it can pretty much always be picked. Um, so that's another thing is it doesn't matter what situation you're in, it's clickable, which makes it just another thing in its favor. Is it better than AoA in my mind? It's It's like about the same as AoA in my mind. It's harder to use. It probably has higher caps than AoA, but lower consistency and requires more risk because you have to leak. And if you go for counterattack 12 and they go for, or let's say everyone sends on 10, you go for counterattack 12 and they go for counterattack resend 11, you're in a, it's a risk you have to take because you're playing to leak, usually to no send. But even taking counterattack in a spot where you don't have to, because like you're getting long save to 11, there's nothing better for you to take. Like you can't take anything that helps you hold, so you just take counterattack and play for you're maybe already out of the game and you need Mythium, so you take counterattack as a punch to win the game later. I think it's reasonable. Creditor, let's see. Oops. So creditor is you can shift 170 golds between 11 and 13, and you get 85 of that gold, so or 50% of it, 85 gold per wave. So it's I mean it's the greatest economic spell you can get over from 11 to 14. I mean that's what is it? 255 gold, which is pretty good. It does come with a risk. One, you have to shift on 11, and which means that, which is very difficult, or it's not very difficult, but it requires certain setup, so you can't pick it every time. And being good enough on 11 to cred there, to ascend, usually means that you're good. You have units that are bad on 13. Um, there's some exceptions, of course, but think like Haven or something like that. Um, so it can be a strong spell because it warps the mid game around it. Basically in Creditor games, and even if you're ahead with Creditor, you basically have won the game because the enemies literally can't play the game. Like they have, if you just overbuild Creditors, go 11 to 15, like there's not really much they can do. You're basically on value the whole time. If you have, good units for all the waves, then or good enough units to hold all the waves, you're just on value. They're not. You probably have a huge lead. If you're even and you're able to creditor and someone isn't, it gives you some sort of advantage. Usually you're trading off value for workers, and if your build is good enough, then that's fine because then their plays are the plays to counter creditor are obviously like if you're super pushed, you can resend to try and catch people while they're shifting on 12 or 13. Um, or you can just try and hit them on 14 where you expect them to skip. Because generally creditor means since your lower workers units save longer, so you can kind of abuse that and just push really hard and send and go for an undercut. But it's not as strong as it like I think it's a very risky but pretty decent reward. Um Tough to say. I feel like it's definitely better than allowance in my head. Um but maybe that just means I think allowance is worse than it is. I don't know. Not sure where to put it. I'll leave it in B tier because I think these offensive spells I rate higher than it. And I think battle scars I rate higher just because it's more consistent and more takeable, like most of the time. Dark Ritual, I mean, you pay, forget the percentage. It's 20% of your current health. You gain 145 gold, so it's an extremely good defensive option. And on 11, if you need to hit a threshold, it's not a bad offensive option as well because you can essentially get 3 workers off of it and push for something like all in 12 or whatnot. And um, without tenacity, with tenacity, it's a lot more risky. It was a lot more risky to take Dark Ritual. Um, I think I'd probably rate it like somewhere like around allowances tier. Like there are definitely situations where I'd rather just take tax or take allowance. Which maybe make Dark Ritual lower in my estimation, but it is definitely a very strong defensive tool. It gives you, I mean, 50 more gold allowance. Obviously, you take some king damage, but on 11, oftentimes Legion is about hitting certain gold thresholds, so the 45 gold can be the difference between like building a second bunk and some trash value and getting a haven, for example, or like building a second DK instead of getting, or a second dancer instead of getting DK, or something along those lines where you hit some important threshold. So it definitely can be strong. I think I'm personally not that big of a fan of it, but that is just me. Next spell, Divine Blessing. So you gain 2000 health, 16% attack speed on a single fighter. I think this is probably our first S tier spell. It's kind of it's pickable in almost every situation, and it completely warps the game when it's combined with certain units. Think Dread Knight, Azeria are the main culprits, but also like Doppel and Sov are good users of it. But basically, it allows you. It's one of insane defensive spell on 11, even if you don't have a good user. It's 2000 HP onto a fortified unit. Obviously, you lose the buff if it dies, which probably happens if you're using it in that kind of situation. But 2000 HP of fortified on 11 is pretty good. And it has insane synergy with some of the units like we mentioned. So like if you have playing against Divine DK or Divine Priest, it forces the enemies to save long, and you can kind of abuse that either by staying overvalue being unleakable yourself, or you can just push super hard and play undervalue and still hold well with Divine. Um, Basically just an extremely strong defensive spell, extremely strong offensive spell in terms of what it lets you do while saving. Um, yeah, pretty crazy and almost always pickable. Embargo, where do we rank Embargo? Probably, it's probably I'm like tempted to put it in S, but basically Embargo is you can't send after you can't send mercs post income on 11 until and you that lasts until wave after wave 12 spawns. So like you can send on 13, you just can't send anything on 12. Then you get 80 gold and 80 mythium. So it's uh it's it's a spell that gives you a lot of strength on wave 13 and after. If that's the game plan, which oftentimes that's how games shape out. It's incredibly risky to take it when there's aggressive 12 spells though, and you don't have good builds there because you literally can't send Mythium on 12 to defend yourself. So if someone goes overwork or counterattack on you, you just have to sit there and eat it. But other than that, it's pretty much always pickable. I mean, there's some spots where you can't pick it, right? You're going for a 12 send yourself. You need to play around a possible 12 send. You need the defense. You need the king ups on 11. You're trying to go all in on 11. So it's not like, but it's a very flexible spell. It's not like the perfect offensive spell, but for 13, it's very good. It gives you gold. It gives you Mythium, and if you're sending 13, the Mythium converts to gold. So on that wave, so it's one of the best spells. And 13 is such an important wave in the mid game. I mean, we often have send patterns like 10-13, 9-13. So it's very strong spell in terms of what allows you to do. And even like a situation like 11 to 14, the extra gold is just defensive on 13. It's basically like tax, but here's another 80 free Mythium. Or like 10 less gold, 80 Mythium, which is definitely worth it. So I think is it better than 808? I don't know. We'll just say that we're not ranking between the tiers that carefully. Giant snails. I think this is okay. So giant snails basically turn your snails into raid bosses. They get like 260 bonus health, 11 bonus damage, so they actually do a crap ton of damage um, for their Mythium. But basically turns snails into raid bosses, and it's very hard to hold 11 against giant snails because there aren't a lot of units that are good versus it that you want on your board on 11 usually. Um, so the problems with it obviously being it kind of falls off. And if your opponent has a build that isn't really affected by it, then you're kind of just wasting your Legion spell. Um, that is usually the downside of it, and oftentimes later on you're not going to want to send so many snails because you might have important Mythium thresholds to hit, like, oh, I need to send Centaur, and then I need to send a pack, and then, oh, I have like 40 Mythium to send these two snails, and maybe one of the other Legion spells would be better. how often is it worse than tax or even allowance? Like quite often. Like I feel like it's low key like a C tier, but it can be very, very strong when it's good. So that makes me like inclined towards thinking it's stronger, but stuff like sending on 10 and resending 11 with full giant snails can be very good. People often aren't ready, and it requires you to play with a lot more value than you'd expect on 11. How do I see it? Yeah, I'm okay with leaving in C tier for now. I'll maybe think about it when I rate some other ones. Glacial. Um, so Glacial, what it does is you can put it on one of your units, and that gives them a, it makes their attacks slow move speed by 90%. And then if the person they're hitting dies, it explodes and deals like an AoE damage, 50 AoE. So it's really good synergy with certain units. The other strength is it's really strong with boss waves, like or basically waves with. I mean, it's strong on both, right? It's good against waves like 15, where you can, if you have a long range unit to put it on, it can basically make the boss not do damage for a while if it's running towards your ranged units. It can basically makes holding 20 automatic because the big Maccabeus literally can't move. Um, and it's pretty good on like 13 and stuff where you have like a bunch of like a not too many big guys walking around. Um, but it's also good on AoE waves because of the explosion effect. So if you have any sort of other AoE to complement it, it's really strong there as well. It has some units that make use of it, mostly long range DPS units. But stuff like Glacial and Nightmare isn't even that bad. It's just some sort of damage amp for the Nightmare. Uh, where do I rate it in terms of like as a defensive spell? It's pretty middling. Like in terms of instant impact on 11, it's not that high, and like it's something. But is it better than 100 gold to hit an important unit? Like I'm not sure. Obviously, it scales a lot harder than 100 gold. Uh, it's probably like a B tier spell. Like, look in my head, I want to rate over allowance just because I like the spell a lot, but I'm not sure if that's right. Okay, next spell, Guardian Angel. So this bad boy just lets one of your fighters come back to life with 1500 HP, I think. Which is quite useful, I would say. Um, it's good on 11. That's 1500 fortified armor or whatever. One of your important units, presumably. It's pretty much always pickable. Like, there are some units that benefit a lot more from having two lives. Like, I don't know, mm, Priestess, you could say, although I'm not like convinced it's that good on Priestess, but it's definitely not bad on Priestess. But compared to some of the other spells you can take on her, where she just doesn't die, there are better options, I feel like. It's pretty good on stuff like mana units, because they respawn with the mana that they would start with, or they had previously. So stuff like Solve can be pretty good with GA. Um, obviously, the stuff like Doppel is fine with GA as well. Melee carries that can die quickly. Giving them a second life is not bad. Not really stuff like something like Phoenix, obviously, is really good with it. Um, I think I mean, yeah, I'd say it's like a pretty average spell. Like tempted to put it here just because it has some decent synergies. I I think that's fine. Um, Hero, so Hero gives you an aura effect that buffs the damage and defense by 4.5% of the adjacent units. So basically a super hard scaling spell that can be very good on 11 if you have a big unit already or a lot of units to take advantage of it. Generally what I think of is like Nightmare Butcher, like if you have double head chef and like tanks already on the head chef, like the hero can be insane value instantly. Or if you have like Kingpin plus Aura on 11, Kingpin plus LOD on 11, stuff like that, or like a Warwick Circle on 11. This is definitely like maybe an S tier spell. I wonder if it's S or A. I don't know. I mean, it's a strong defensive spell that has great scaling because the more value you put on an aura, the more efficient it is, obviously. Um, So, it's pretty much pickable all the time. Its worst case scenario is really not that bad. Like even if you don't have that much value to put on it, it still makes your units better. And presumably you pick some units that can take advantage of um, additional defense and attack. So yeah, I think I'm okay with rating it A tier. Maybe it's an S tier. I can't say for certain, but it's an extremely strong spell, and you can definitely play around it and or tailor your mastermind, like play Chaos or something where you can try and fish for auras. But it's quite common to have auras to begin with in your rule. So if you already have auras, you amp them with hero. Um, it's quite efficient. Okay, next spell, investment. It's, like I said, it's kind of like the money version of battle scars. Instead of giving you the value on your fighter, you just kind of get money. Again, the similar downsides, no instant impact. It's literally it's like this. It's worse than taxed until 13, and then it's barely better than taxed because you don't have as much gold on uh the wave before. So it's I don't know. I feel like it's definitely in my mind not as good as battle scars because you can't like battle scars turns one of your units into a beast. Like it increases the value. Investment gives you more value to place on distribute around, but in general, having your value contained in one unit is better because the values you get whatever value longer as long as the unit's alive. So like you would rather have one sovereign with um, that was super buff compared to like two sovereigns that were half as weak. Because once one of the small sovereigns dies, then you only have half a sovereign left. Uh, yeah, I'm okay with BT. I mean, it's still strong because games can scale, and it's like if you're playing something like Cartel, you might need it to stay. You can use it to stay relevant or to save longer because you can use the income boost to take advantage of you not sending and not buffing your income that way. Yeah, I think I'm okay with putting in like B tier. I'm like tempted to put in like C tier. Its impact is just so low, I feel like, but I'm rating battle scars so high just because of the potential synergies with the units. Ah, can I in good conscience rate this C tier? Like the thing is it's almost always pickable though, which makes me more like it more. I feel like some of these like you get dinged for not being able to pick it all the time, but like investment is pickable most of the time. All right, let's look at another offensive spell, Lizard Army. Um, you get 50 Mythium? Yeah, 50 Mythium instantly, and then one lizard on 11, two lizards on 12, three lizards on 13. So it's one of the strongest. It's a strong spell on 11 to begin with because sending a lizard on 11 and like it's not that good because the same typing as the wave. But since you usually send a pair, like if you're going for a big send, it's probably like a four eyes. Um, So then you want to push the four eyes right anyways with the lizards. So it's not wasted. And then 50, so like that's 90 Mythium right away on 11 technically. 50 plus the lizard. So that's pretty good. And it's especially good if you want to go for a 13 send afterwards. I mean, it's fine if you're going for a straight 13 cent as well. You can play mind games with it as well. Maybe people are less willing to shift on 12 if you show them Lizard Army and it's a real Lizard Army, because you might randomly go for a 12 cent and their recommended value will be bad. You can also use it as a mind game to make it seem like you would never skip 13 because you took Lizard Army, but then you can just skip 13 anyways, and the enemies might like panic Income King and you get to one shot them on 15, for example. Yeah, this is definitely like A tier spell. I feel like the downside of Lizard Army is obviously that you can't really use it defensively because the 40 Mythium you get is always a lizard. You can't use it for king ups or something. And you feed the enemy's gold if you don't actually leak them when you're sending lizards. It's not that much gold, to be fair, but it is something. Yeah, I think I'm okay with putting it. I feel like it's a very strong aggressive spell. Um, is it better than counterattack? It's hard to say because obviously the 80 and the 120 Mythium on it's usually don't want to send lizards, but it is free like sends. But the other ones do help you reach like Mythium thresholds. Like if you get a counterattack off, that's 110 Mythium compared to 50. AoE is 100. I don't know. I think I'm okay with putting it in A tier, like similarly strong as the rest of them. Okay, we have Loan, which is the ultimate defensive spell on 11 in terms of money. Um, okay, just go some B tier, sure. Uh, so you get 200 gold. You pay an income penalty. Um, it's 33 income, I think. So by wave 13, you basically took allowance, and it hurts your scaling past that. But it's extremely strong on 11 because we talk about hitting thresholds, and 200 gold will certainly get you to a tier 6 upgrade, or tier 5 upgrade, or whatever unit you need to hit. So in terms of answering 11 cent, it's quite good. It can be a decent offensive spell as well. You basically get 4 workers and obviously pay an income penalty, but presumably if you're pushed, make up for it. Um, Sometimes it's not really pickable because you it's basically only pickable when you like absolutely need to hold 11 no matter what, and the other spells don't help you do that. Um, because the income penalty is quite severe and like unless you're playing something like Castle where you're basically getting 200 gold for free on 11, which can be very helpful because you're already starved the first 10 waves, you're lower value and the loan makes up for it, but you lose your income advantage over time. I don't know, there are trade-offs, and loan definitely requires a big risk and big read because if you get skipped on 11 and the game goes into some sort of longer save, or if you just get income kinged on 11 and you just loaned for nothing, and the enemies didn't loan and you didn't create an advantage with your send on 11, for example, like imagine a situation where you go try hard 11, enemies match with income king, you take loan because you were worried about a full send, they don't take loan and hold your income, or sorry, I okay. A situation where both teams are going 11, one team is committed to a full like you commit, you're worried about a full send, you income king, they income king, you take loan, they don't take loan. You're just so far behind now. Because presumably what will happen is a longer save into like 14, 15 from 11, and you're just playing down 33 income, and they got whatever other Legion spell. So by the time it's 14, 15, you've lost gold, and it's not very good. um, I don't know. I think I'm okay with putting it in B tier. Like it's still a super strong defensive spell. It just comes with some penalties. Magician, I'd probably put in S tier. It's incredibly strong, especially one you can treat value right now with Magician Anglers. That is a disturbing synergy, but if you have Disciple, if you have Steed, if you have any sort of mana generation um, like that, the Magician just super efficient spell, and it's I wouldn't say it's always takeable because you need to have a mana generation unit, but the odds of you not having one are low-ish if you play like a standard Mastermind. Uh, yeah, I think its power is just super high. It's efficient on 11 already if you have units. Probably worse in terms of placeability on 11 compared to some other stuff because you need to specifically have mana units down. But it scales really well. All the units, but that's also because all the units that make use of Magician well scale really hard off of it. Scale really hard themselves. So like Disciple, Arc, stuff like that. Um, but I'm okay with leaving it here. I think it's extremely strong right now. Um, Overwork, it's probably S tier. Um, if you are strong on 12 and there is overwork, you can pretty much take it regardless of your situation. Obviously, you have to have some sort of workers to make it better than other offensive spells, but in fast and high-paced games, like overwork is basically unskippable. And if you do not take overwork, you're one, probably not holding 12, and two, probably not leaking your guy, or there's a chance you don't leak your guy, which would be really bad on a 12 race. It's insanely powerful in terms of generating income as well. Even if you aren't able to go for a full send, if you match someone's overwork with your own income king and you don't leak badly, then you're also in a good spot. Because overwork lets you push extremely hard and generate huge income, which lets you, play long saves later and lets you scale into the game. Um, and one of like a really, it also lets builds that are bad on 13 just avoid that problem by forcing like something like 10, 12 super hard. And then overwork's also not bad on 11, especially if you think there's ever a possibility of 12 resending. And another thing is you can also take overwork in like a 10-13 game. It's not like, or even something like where you're going 9-13, you expect to send on 11. You can just use the super long wave on 11 to generate a lot of Mythium for as an offensive spell for 13. As provided wave 12 is short, obviously, and you have some workers to take advantage of overwork. But yeah, all in all, I think it's maybe the best offensive spell. Okay, Pawn Shop. You get the Pawn Shop ability, which is like everything is scrollable, and you get 70 gold instantly now. So that's probably one of the premier defensive spells, might be the best one. It's definitely A tier. I wonder if it's S tier. And the flexibility of Pawn Shop is just crazy, and it's pickable almost every game. Like, yeah, it's just an S tier spell. It also makes Chaos completely broken, because you can just swap your board constantly, always pick good units, delete the bad ones from your early game that you needed to hold stuff with early, and you can just scale infinite. Lets you do some like pretty game warping plays too, like you just sell your units and build like full something for a wave that you're certain is coming. So like I know 17's coming. It's gonna be a race. I sell like all my shit value and build a million hardened golems or a million gate guards or something like that, and I hold the longest. For example, there's downside. You lose 10% of your board value. I mean, I remember a Nova Cup game where Exlot did some curious pawn shopping and maybe threw a huge lead because he's just minus 1 trillion value from pawn shopping his whole board. Um, so there's some risk. It also doesn't give the most gold at 11. We talk about hitting threshold. 70 doesn't let you hit a lot, but you can just pawn shop bad value on 11 to hit the rest of the gold. Yeah, I think it's just too flexible, too pickable to be not raking it as PTA. I don't know. He's just like the maligned little brother of all the other offensive spells. He's the allowance of offensive spells. He just gives you 75 Mythium. That's pretty good. 75 is a lot. Wait, is it 75 or is it 70? It's 75. That's a good amount. But it's kind of less than AOA. There's no income penalty, but you don't really care about income penalties when you're trying to kill someone. Um, so it's fine. I think I'll just put it in B tier. Like we talked about offensive spells already. It does the same thing. It's just less Mythium than some, and less potential than counterattack. Less risk too, but um, when the reward is a decent amount more Mythium, I think PTA just falls a little bit behind. Protector. This is S or A tier for sure. Okay, let's just leave it in A for now while I talk about it. Gives you 650 HP on a fighter and then an aura that buffs the regen by 0.8% mythic health as long as that fighter's alive. Technically, it's within an AoE, but it should hit most or all of your units. Pretty insane on specific units like Phoenix, Azeria, Doppel, Sov. We already talked about these bad boys who abuse the fact that they get more HP, the extra HP and the regen extremely well. But also it's really strong generically. You can just put it on your ranged DPS unit and keep the buff alive for as long as possible. You can also use the HP buff instantly on 11 as good defensive value. Basically, it's like half of Titan plus whatever, however much you value the rest of the regen effect, depending on your units. That can be a lot. It scales really well because percent missing health regen is pretty good as your units get bigger and bigger and you put more value down. Yeah, all in all, I'd say it's probably like, is it S tier? I mean, I don't know. I'm just letting everybody into S tier if I do that, right? I don't know. Because full of them, definitely putting in S tier. Okay, so they changed it so that it used to be like pseudo RNG. Now it's just straight up you stun every 3 attacks or every 6 attacks, and you have 4% attack speed on the unit. You stun for them for 2 seconds, but stun bosses for like 0.3. Okay, so at one we talk about synergies. This unit has insane synergies with anything with attack speed. So I don't know, like Doppel, Sov, Priestess, um, Zerker, DK. I mean, yeah, and it's still strong on things that like Halo. It's still strong on things that are just generic like ranged DPS units like Daphne, Zeus. It's fine to put Pole on them and get some value that way. It's fine on like something like a Lioness, the 6 stack. And it's extremely strong on wave 13. It's decent value on 11. It's not amazing there, but it's something. Strong on 13, can be good on 15, can be good on 20. Turns certain melee carries into just Giga raid bosses, and it's pretty much always pickable. Like you probably have some unit on your board that can use it. Um, Maybe it's not as pickable as something like Protector. You might not get quite the base. The worst case for pull is maybe lower than Protector, but I feel like its best cases in simplicity and strength. It's just too crazy on some units, man. It's just divine. It's like the same effect as divine. It just turns certain units into Giga Chads. Alright, so next up, Sacrifice. Oh, well, we talk about premier defensive spells. This is somewhere like, probably like, I'll give this bad boy, I think he's better than some of the options in B tier in terms of defensive options, because one sack gives you 85 gold, which is, I don't know, that's a good amount of gold. Um, and lets you turn one unit in, recoup its value completely. So it's a defensive spell that can be used on 11 and other waves. Like you can take the gold from sack and then use the sack effect somewhere else. You can also use the sack effect instantly, which could be super good in some spots. Like you can turn, like for example, if you had a solve on your board for 9 and 10, you could just turn 270 value into an LOD, for example, on 11, and then maybe you just easy hold the send or something. Stuff like that. And then later on or something, you like imagine you have Kingpin on 11, you take the sack extra gold, helps you hold 11. They go for something crazy like 11, 13. You sack your Kingpin on 13 and like poop out I don't know, a Phoenix, a Azuria, a Sov, something that just auto holds 13. It's extremely flexible. It's like a one-time pawn shop for, full value. Um, but I think it's extremely strong. And the downsides obviously I feel like I might be understanding is that you can't always sack something huge and get a lot of gold out of it. Like you might not have a unit that's sackable for that much gold. And in that case, it's just kind of in like a one-time pawn shop for some shitty value, but like the fact it can still help you hit a threshold, like even pawn shopping like a tier 3 unit, like 100 gold, that's basically giving you allowance. Um, or not giving you an allowance, but giving you an allowance towards hitting a spike. Obviously, you lose some value, but if it was bad value to begin with, yeah. Uh, Savior. I mean, it's just we have taxed at home. I mean, it heals your king a lot, which was pretty good. Probably more valuable when you consider that when being 100% king was very important, but with tenacity. But I mean, the effective HP is, I think, similar, so it's probably not lost that much value. Yeah, it's pretty generic. Just gives you 90 gold and heals your king. Could be useful if both kings are your king took a lot of damage early game and you were playing like castle or something. This lets you scale back and keeps you out of threat. Yeah, but doesn't give you that much. It gives you slightly less gold. I mean, it's better. It's just better. I mean, it's definitely better than It's better than allowance might have. Healing your king is pretty important. Well, in some cases it is better. Some cases it's just taxed, instant tax, which is not bad. But like when you compare it to something like sack, yeah, it's just not. I don't think it's quite shining so brightly. Sork, I want to put it in an A tier, but like I feel like it's more of a B tier because its best case usage case is extremely strong on Archer, Priestess, Bunk, but its worst case is literally unclickable. So yeah, I think it's a B tier. So Sork basically makes your ability damage, fighter's ability damage increase by 57.5%, which is a lot on certain units. So like Trinity Archer, Azuria, Haven, those guys abuse Sork really. So basically it can warp the game in terms of like uh being able to get those units with Sork. You can plan your whole game around getting those units. You can lock in Archer if you think it's a Sork game. And it's really not that bad because you generate so much value. You may make up for the income you lose for playing lock-in. Yeah, but like I said, you can miss and it could be a dead slot for you. So I feel like I can't rate it that highly. Again, I'm not really like ranking them in order, but um, it's probably somewhere around Glacial because it caps higher than Glacial, I feel like, but its average case is worse. Titan, 1300 HP to units. You can't really go wrong with this guy. It's extremely strong in some units that, like your raid boss units or your big tank units, because a lot of HP, or if you have damage reduction, I should say, flat HP is really efficient there. So your Azuria, your Phoenix become even more raid bosses with Titan on it. Otherwise, it can be used in a pinch as a defensive spell. 1300 HP of Fortified is pretty good on 11. I think it's probably like maybe this B tier is just too big and I need to move some of this stuff into C tier, but yeah, I maybe should have pre-planned it. Um, but I think it is not A tier or I mean like how much like the difference between Protector, it's like twice as much HP, but you don't get the healing effect, which is quite good if you have a lot of value. I don't know. I can't say for sure. My intuition tells me it's worse though. Vamp. I think Vamp is also like a B tier. Basically gives you an aura of lifesteal, um, which is very good with certain units. We already talked about all of them. Doppel, Phoenix sometimes if you have like Levi's for it to buff it. Um, Sovereign, DK, your melee carries, Zerker, Kingpin. Um, but it can be pretty unpickable. Like it's not the worst defensive spell of all time. It's your only option. You can take it on gold 11. With like certain fortified units, it might be pretty good there. Um, just giving your tanks a little bit of life still can even help just generate some extra tank value. But I feel like the high end use cases are pretty good. But the same thing I feel like Sork, like the low ends feel pretty bad. It's maybe better than Sork in that you can't literally have no one to put it on that does anything. Like it still always does something and hits 6 units, so it's not or sorry, hits more than 6 units. It hits 7 units because of the unit itself. But um, yeah, it's yeah, nah, I think so. I think I'm fine with putting it in B tier, but yeah, B tier is getting kind of big. So Venture, I mean, tempted to put this in the same boat as Creditor, but it's a little different. It doesn't require you to take a risk on 12 and 13, only on 12 or 11, 12, and 13. It only makes you take a risk on on 11 and 12. And it generates slightly less gold, right? It only gives you 210 gold, but um, it does the same effect as Creditor, where it warps the mid game. If you have Venture, you can just save forever. or you can push really hard and still be on value for 14, stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. It's probably better than Creditor. Is it? I don't know. I can't. Like in my mind, it's like it's about the same. It's less of a risk on 11 too, only paying 100 gold. It's probably better than Creditor. Am I? I'll just give it. I think I'll give it A tier. Like it's really way less of a risk than Creditor. Um, and it gives close to the same reward and lets you do the same sort of mind game or mid game starving. Villain. I think this bad boy's A tier. Um, Villain gives one of your fighter's damage amp attacks, which increases the damage taken from all sources by 26%, 30% if it's a range unit. But again, certain melee units, Doppel, the biggest Doppel, I guess you could. I don't know how good it feels on DK, to be honest, and feels okay on Sov, I think. Same with like Veda or something, but I will say on Doppel it feels insane. It is just so nice on 11. I feel like when I have a villain, one of the buffs, single target buffs for Doppel, Protector, and villain pull on 11 with Doppel with lifesteal, it just easy holds the wave every time against Big Sense just because of how strong it can turn the units in. So I think its high-end use cases are really good. It scales pretty well. It's good on 15, good on like 13, 18, 20, which are very important waves. And you can put it on range units too, and it's fine. Like getting half value, but you always get the value. Like your unit can't die until its last one. Yeah, I think I'm okay with putting 8 here. So I guess that's the video. Um, it's not meant to take as fact, but kind of give you some ideas. Now I feel kind of bad because I'm looking at this list and I just left Giant Snails all alone in C tier. Maybe I should put some stuff down there, but this is a pretty long video already, so I'm just gonna stop now and say thanks for watching.